The sizzle of perfectly marinated ribeye hitting the hot grill filled my backyard with that unmistakable summer aroma. Smoke curled up into the blue California sky as I adjusted the temperature on my new Weber. Then I heard them, sirens, wailing and getting louder by the second. Two police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of my house on Maple Ridge Drive. Officers approached my backyard gate with their hands near their holsters. I stood there, tongs in hand, wearing my Kiss the Cook apron, completely stunned. My only crime? Hosting a Saturday afternoon barbecue for my family. From across the fence came a shrill voice that made my blood pressure spike. There stood Karen Whitmore, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, in her pristine white tennis outfit, pointing at me like I was public enemy number one. She screamed at the officers that my barbecue smoke was violating her constitutional rights and causing her irreparable harm. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. It was Memorial Day weekend in our picture-perfect suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook Estates. I'd moved in 6 months ago with my wife, Lisa, and our 2 kids. The house on Maple Ridge Drive seemed perfect, great schools, tree-lined streets, and a large backyard ideal for entertaining. What the realtor conveniently forgot to mention was that our HOA was run by the most power-hungry woman in Orange County. Karen Whitmore lived 2 houses down and had been HOA president for 8 years running. She ruled our little community with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive newsletter updates. I'd already received 3 warning letters from her. One for leaving my garbage cans visible from the street for 30 minutes past the designated pickup time, another for having a basketball hoop that was apparently 2 inches too tall according to subsection 12.4 of the HOA bylaws, and a third for allowing dandelions to grow in my front lawn for more than 72 hours. On this particular Saturday, I'd invited my brother Mike, his family, and a few neighbors over for a traditional Memorial Day cookout. Nothing crazy, just 15 people enjoying burgers, hot dogs, and some good conversation. The party started at 2 in the afternoon. By 2:15, I noticed Karen peering through her kitchen blinds, no doubt taking mental notes for her next violation report. By 3 o'clock, as the grill reached optimal temperature and I started cooking the first batch of burgers, she'd moved to her back deck, pretending to water plants while shooting daggers in our direction. The kids were playing cornhole, the adults were chatting over cold beverages, and classic rock played softly from our outdoor speakers, well within the HOA's approved decibel levels, which I'd actually measured with an app on my phone, just to be safe. That's when Hurricane Karen made landfall. She marched across her perfectly manicured lawn, through the gate between our properties, and into my backyard, uninvited. Her face was redder than the tomatoes on our burger toppings bar. She announced, in a voice loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear, that I was in violation of HOA Code 7.3.8, which apparently prohibited excessive smoke emissions from outdoor cooking devices. I calmly explained that I was using a standard residential grill, cooking normal amounts of food, and that barbecuing was a perfectly legal activity in our neighborhood. She insisted the smoke was toxic and demanded I shut down the grill immediately. When I politely declined, she claimed the smoke was triggering her asthma. Interesting, considering I'd seen her power walking past my house that very morning without any breathing issues. She threatened me with a $500 fine and said she'd already documented everything with time-stamped photos. My brother Mike, who's a paralegal, stepped forward and asked to see the specific HOA bylaw she was citing. Karen fumbled with her phone, clearly not expecting anyone to challenge her authority. As she scrolled frantically, she began improvising new complaints. The smell of meat was offensive to her vegan sensibilities. The gathering exceeded the approved number of guests for outdoor events. The smoke was killing her prized orchids. When none of these arguments gained traction, she played her trump card. She dramatically clutched her chest, declared this was an assault on her human rights, and announced she was calling 911. We all thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. I watched in disbelief as she actually dialed emergency services and told the dispatcher she was under attack by toxic fumes from an illegal barbecue operation. Within 10 minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up. Officers Chun and Rodriguez approached cautiously, probably expecting something more serious than a suburban barbecue dispute. I set down my spatula and met them at the gate, trying to process the surreal situation. Here I was, a 42-year-old software engineer with no criminal record, potentially getting arrested for grilling burgers in my own backyard. Karen immediately launched into a theatrical performance, claiming I was operating an unlicensed outdoor restaurant, creating a public health hazard, and violating her civil liberties. She actually used the phrase chemical warfare to describe the smoke from my charcoal grill. Officer Chin maintained an impressively straight face as he took notes. The entire party had gone silent, watching this insane scene unfold. My 12-year-old daughter, Emma, was recording everything on her phone, much to Karen's obvious displeasure. Officer Rodriguez asked me for my side of the story. I explained that this was a simple family barbecue, showed him my standard residential grill, and even offered him a burger, which he politely declined due to being on duty. He asked if I had any HOA documents regarding outdoor cooking restrictions. I actually did. After Karen's previous warnings, I'd become somewhat of an expert on our community bylaws. I retrieved the official HOA handbook from my kitchen and showed him the relevant sections. Outdoor grilling was explicitly permitted between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. There were no restrictions on the type of fuel used or the amount of smoke produced, as long as it didn't constitute a genuine fire hazard. Officer Chin stepped aside to make a phone call while Karen continued her rant about constitutional violations and environmental terrorism. Several neighbors had now gathered to watch the spectacle, including Tom Harrison from across the street, who was live-streaming the entire thing on Facebook. The turning point came when Officer Chin returned from his phone call. He'd contacted the city's code enforcement office and confirmed that backyard barbecuing was completely legal in our area. There were no active burn bans, no restrictions on residential cooking, and certainly no human rights violations occurring. He turned to Karen and explained that making false emergency calls was a misdemeanor offense that could result in fines up to $1,000 and potential jail time. The color drained from her face faster than fat dripping from a burger. She tried to backpedal, claiming she genuinely believed she was in danger, but the officers weren't buying it. They'd dealt with her before. Apparently, this wasn't her first frivolous 911 call. Officer Rodriguez mentioned something about a previous incident involving a neighbor's wind chimes that she'd reported as noise torture. The crowd that had gathered spontaneously burst into applause. As the officers prepared to leave, someone shouted, "Let him grill in peace," which got a chuckle even from Officer Chin. Karen stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, as the weight of her mistake began to sink in. The officers gave her an official warning about misuse of emergency services and informed her that any future false reports would result in criminal charges. They also suggested she review the actual HOA bylaws before threatening residents with fines. As they walked back to their cruisers, Officer Rodriguez turned to me with a slight smile and said to enjoy the rest of my barbecue. Karen, thoroughly humiliated, stormed back to her house, but not before declaring, "This isn't over," and announcing that she'd be calling an emergency HOA meeting to address the barbecue problem in our neighborhood. The party resumed with twice the energy. My brother Mike was already researching HOA recall procedures on his laptop. Tom Harrison's live stream had attracted hundreds of viewers who were commenting in real time about Barbecue Karen and her ridiculous claims. The burgers tasted extra delicious that day, seasoned with the sweet flavor of justice. Over the next few days, the video Tom posted went absolutely viral. Someone edited it with dramatic music and captions highlighting Karen's most outrageous quotes. Chemical warfare from charcoal became a meme. Violating my human rights with ribeye was printed on t-shirts. The video hit 2 million views within 72 hours. News outlets picked up the story. Karen Whitmore became the face of HOA overreach nationwide. The emergency HOA meeting she called backfired spectacularly. Over 100 residents showed up, the highest attendance in the organization's history. Person after person stood up to share their own stories of Karen's petty tyranny. The woman who got fined for having the wrong shade of beige on her mailbox, the family who received a violation notice for their child's chalk drawings on their own driveway, the elderly man who was threatened with legal action because his rose bushes exceeded the approved height by 3 inches. When it came time to vote, Karen was removed from her position as HOA president by a margin of 97-3. She was also banned from serving on any HOA committees for 5 years. But the real consequences were just beginning. The city prosecutor, who had seen the viral video along with everyone else, decided to make an example of Karen's misuse of emergency services. She was formally charged with making a false 911 report and abusing emergency services. At her hearing 3 weeks later, Judge Patricia Hoffman was not amused by Karen's attempts to justify her actions. The prosecutor presented evidence of her 3 previous false emergency calls, including the wind chime incident and another where she reported a neighbor's birthday.